I haven't started studying yet, but I think they'll be fine.
Okay. I have no doubt that you're going to finish with flying colors and finish strong.
Thank you.
Excellent. I think we should get started just in a couple minutes. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let people stream in for another minute or two.
Yeah, very good. Nathan, your light. Do you have any way to add more light to your background or no?
Background, no. Let me adjust the brightness on my computer.
There you go. If you have a white screen, it will illuminate you.
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent. And Nadia, are you still thinking about taking a gap year?
No, I think the deadline passed. It was June 5th to request a gap year, and I didn't. So I'm just going to go with whatever Penn decides.
Okay, very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Good decision. Great. Okay, I think we have quite a few participants that have zoomed in. So shall we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Good.
Welcome. Okay, great. Thank you everybody for zooming in. We're very happy to see you again and to welcome you to the latest iteration of the Ivy Insider panel featuring Nathan Vanelli, our counselor, our educational consultant in Abu Dhabi, graduate of Brown University with a 4.0, who I know you don't like to put it out there, but quite an achievement to graduate with a clean sheet. And Ananya Singhal, who will be attending Penn in the fall. Ananya, your energy, your positivity, your perseverance, your persistence were all extremely impressive over the course of the application process, and I really admire you. And I'm sure everybody who's zooming in now is going to want to hear about your story and journey, and I encourage everybody to please input your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, which we'll get to at the end of the presentation. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Nathan, for leading this discussion, and thank you, Ananya, for appearing on the webinar.
Thank you.
With that, I pass it over to you, Nathan.
Great, so thank you, Peter, for the very generous introduction. And I'm gonna go right ahead and turn the spotlight onto Ananya, our star for today. I've had the good fortune of working with her. I know her pretty well. So I'd just like to start off this conversation by asking you, Ananya, to tell our attendees a little bit about yourself, where you go to school, what you're interested in, what you'll be studying.
Mm-hmm. So hi, everyone. My name is Ananya Singhal. I will be attending the University of Pennsylvania this fall, hopefully. Currently with a major in computer science in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. And I currently go to the International School of Shuaifat, Abu Dhabi. Also, I just want to throw in a fun fact about myself. I really like puns, and we'll get back to this later on in the session.
Yes, puns were a critical component of Ananya's admissions process. So before we begin, I just want to, or we've begun, but before we begin talking about the core of what the admissions process looked like for you, I wanted to just get a sense of why you chose the US in the first place. Why not Canada? Why not the UK?
Yeah, so when I started looking into different countries, like for college back in sophomore year, I personally am a very indecisive person, and I have like a lot of varied interests. So just like what appealed to me about the US was that you can go in and sort of experiment in a variety of different fields before having to narrow it down. And that's essentially the reason I chose the US.
So that flexibility, the curricular flexibility.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. We'll get into why that matters to you a little later in our conversation, because your interests are all over the place in the best way possible.
For sure.
Another question I'd kind of want our viewers to know is, what distinguishes the US admissions process from other admissions processes?
So I'm sure everyone has heard this word a lot, holistic. So the US admissions process is like, it takes into account everything, like a lot of different factors. So like from your personality to like teacher recommendations to extracurriculars, I feel like the US admissions process gives you a chance to like really show your entire being as a whole, like beyond just your academics. So that's another reason the US really appeals to me.
Great. And something that's particularly important as a part of US admissions is extracurricular involvement. I'm sure many of our attendees have heard about extracurriculars, or thinking about what kind of extracurriculars most interest them, which might be most strategic to participate in.
Mhm.
What were you involved in as a high schooler, both inside and outside of school?
Right. So inside school, my school, like Shoifat, has this thing called the SLO, which is basically our student government. So that was a major part of my high school experience. Like that took up a lot of my time. But other than that, I definitely had to go searching for like different regions outside school where I could let out my passions. So one of the things I love doing is debate. So there were these two international competitions, World Scholars Cup and then Model UN conferences that, again, like took up a large chunk of my time. But then other than like debate, one thing I love doing just in my free time is poetry. So in sophomore year was when like I started a poetry blog, and although like poetry isn't the kind of extracurricular where you can just like go in and like win competitions. Like there aren't that many available, but I think poetry was the extracurricular that sort of allowed me to grow as a person, and I think that's what came off in my essays and like my everything personality related.
Absolutely. So thinking about all these activities, were you involved in them for a year, 2 years, 3 years? What was sort of the depth of your involvement in these different activities?
It definitely varied. So with my school's like student government, I had kind of been involved like ever since I joined the school, but then like the main like leadership positions I would say is only given to high school students. So that started around freshman, sophomore year. And then with poetry, again, that's something I've always been interested in, especially like in Abu Dhabi, there's this Indian Social and Cultural Center where they do these literary competitions every year. So I started doing those, I think when I was 12. And then that's when like I really got involved in poetry.
Awesome. And I think the variety of activities you've described is really important. I think sometimes there's a sense that you have to do activities that fit neatly into the lines of a CV, that usually follow a bullet point, that fit into the boxes the Common App offers you as far as activities are concerned. But you found ways throughout your application to incorporate your love of poetry, whether in your personal statement. I think just your writing as a whole reflects this interest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the Common Apps, like the activity section is quite structured, but there are definitely like loopholes, like the additional information section where you can just put in anything that's important to you that like you didn't have a chance to mention anywhere else.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's a holistic process. They're looking not only at the things you can describe and represent more formally, but they're also looking at how you fill your free time. What are your hobbies? What are you interested in? And you can find different ways of incorporating those aspects, which you very much did.
Yeah.
And so as we approach the summer, a lot of students are thinking, particularly this summer, how can I get involved? How can I deepen what I'm already doing? How can I find new ways of challenging myself? So my question to you is, how did you spend your summers?
Well, obviously the way I spent my summers would be quite different from this coming summer because a lot of the things might have to be online. But the way I've spent like my last 2 summers, like a sort of template would be a 2-week summer program, and then traveling to a new country with my family, and then like a couple of internships just around Abu Dhabi. So this past summer, the summer after junior year, I spent 2 weeks at Yale doing the Yale Young Global Scholar Summer Program. And that was just an extremely enriching and packed 2 weeks. Like we took lectures with Yale professors. We had seminars with like leading PhD students. But I think what like I most liked about YYGS was before I went there, I was terrified about everything college had to bring. I had no idea what to expect. But I think those 2 weeks were sort of crash course in like college life. And after that, like now I just can't wait to go back, you know?
Right, and I imagine it offered you a sense of what it could actually be like to be a college student, whether on Yale's campus or any other campus.
Yeah, like a sense of familiarity.
Great. Did you have a favorite course at Yale?
A favorite, my favorite seminars were, so again, because like my 2 favorite subjects are computer science and math. So before we went into YYGS, they gave us like this seminar brochure. And all of the seminars I loved were related to computer science and math. There was this one about randomness. There was one about computational complexity. And they were all taught by an instructor whose initials were ZB. So I was like, this guy sounds super interesting. And then once we actually got to campus, they have this thing called family time, which is where they basically put a group of 10 students together with an instructor, and that's like your surrogate family. And just by some miracle of the universe, my family leader turned out to be ZB, Zach Busick surfer. So that was just incredible.
Amazing. Did you feel like this experience gave you a better idea of what to expect from college level courses as well, how they might differ from the courses you're currently taking in high school?
Yeah, in one way, like because in high school courses, I feel like we don't really have that much discussion going in class, except in like AP English. I would say AP English is like the only class where we actually like regularly discuss our ideas and everything. But with college, especially seminars, and even like with lectures, the breakout sessions that follow lectures, there's always like so many opportunities to share your viewpoint and to just like see what everyone else is thinking. And like I feel like you really grow from what everyone else is experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Seminars are really, really invaluable in that sense, and I think they're often a departure from what high school students are used to.
Yeah, for sure.
Being able to learn from peers as well as from professors.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing students often have on their mind the summer after year 11, junior year 12, whatever you want to call it, is the personal statement.
Mm-hmm.
Personal statement being sort of the centerpiece of the common application, the main way for you to tell your story to an admissions officer. So obviously, I've read your personal statement many times. I've read different iterations of your personal statement. I want to know what you liked most about the personal statement you wrote. In addition to a gist for our attendees, what did you write about?
Yeah, so I wrote about like this poetry project I did back in sophomore year when I started my poetry blog, where basically I wrote like 2 poems a month, and like my goal was to experiment with different poetic forms. But then the point of like the story that I told in my personal statement was that like by the end I realized that poetic forms are not always things you should follow, because sometimes they hinder like your expression of thoughts. So the entire like theme throughout was like knowing when you have to break the rules. And as to like what I liked most about my own personal statement, I think what I tried to do in mine was instead of just like constantly narrating and then like just giving my reflections on everything that happened in the last paragraph, I tried to like keep intertwining the two. So throughout, I feel like I added like these little reflections on everything that was going on. Yeah. Definitely.
And I think one of the, not quite the dangers, but one of the sort of missteps that the 5-paragraph essay proposes or makes more likely is the idea that you should save all of your reflections, all of your analysis for that last paragraph. That's where you throw it at your reader, you tell them everything you've ever thought about this entire experience. But what you did really, really well in your essay was you incorporated reflection throughout. Yeah. There wasn't a paragraph of the essay in which you weren't asking yourself questions.
Exactly. And also with the whole, since you mentioned the 5-paragraph like form, that's been like the format we've used like throughout high school. Like even with AP English, even though like the style of answering has changed, like it's still been 5-paragraph essays. And then when you go into writing college essays, you see how like unnecessary that is. Like I don't think I use the 5-paragraph format in any of my essays.
Yeah, and the personal essay is a genre apart for students in really any sort of curriculum. They might be used to writing argumentative essays that incorporate words like furthermore, moreover, in conclusion. They're used to formulas that don't really apply to the personal essay. And I think your point about knowing when to break the rules absolutely applies to writing the personal essay itself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you mentioned those like sort of terms like in conclusion, moreover, because I remember when I started applying to summer programs, like this was like January of last year, I showed Peter my essays for, I think it was like MIT's RSI program. And he saw like me using all these transition words like all in all and stuff. And he was like, no, this is not how we write college essays.
Yeah. For anybody listening, furthermore, moreover, in conclusion, banish them from your writing. You are writing a personal essay. This is in your own voice. If your own voice is a voice that says furthermore, if that's something you say in conversation with your friends, on that off chance, it might belong in your writing. Otherwise, it does take a bit of adaptation. kind of getting
For sure.
comfortable with your own voice, especially when you're encouraged throughout high school to never use I in an essay, to move from that mode of thinking to a mode of thinking in which you are at the center of your writing and your thinking is a transition, to say the least.
Definitely.
And so beyond your personal essay, you wrote many other essays, supplemental essays. Yeah, many. For those who are listening and who don't know about the supplemental essays, different universities will ask for essays in addition to the Common App essay. Some universities don't ask for any, some ask for 1, 2, some ask for 11. We're looking at you, Stanford. You wrote many of these. Of the many, which was your favorite?
This is a pretty cliche answer to what was your favorite prompt, but I would have to say the U Chicago one. I think the U Chicago prompts, like, they're all so unique, but the one that instantly spoke to me, going back to my fun fact that I love puns, the one that spoke to me was, there's a typo in the name of every department at U Chicago. So describe your new major and why you chose to pursue it. So what I wrote about was U Chicago has this interdisciplinary major called Big Problems. So I changed that to jig problems, and then I talked about my inability to dance and how that could be like a more effective way to teach people how to dance could be like incorporating astrophysics and creative writing. Yeah.
Creative writing was truly iconic, and this was to me the essay in which your punniness, your love of puns, really shone through, and it's absolutely an essay that encourages creativity, experimentation, thinking outside of the box. I think my favorite U Chicago prompt is, are you familiar with the tree mail prompt?
No, I don't think so.
So basically, the city of Melbourne instituted a program where every tree receives an ID number. And residents of the city could address an email to the municipality in order to report issues with the trees. What actually happened was residents wrote love letters to the trees. They asked the trees about their opinions on the Greek debt crisis, all sorts of things. And so that particular prompt asks applicants to write a letter to an inanimate object of their choice.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
That's one of my favorites. Some of the supplements are a little more cut and dry. You wrote many why essays. Can you tell us about how you approach those less creative essays?
Yeah, so for the why essay, I think what's most difficult is just like learning how to answer it, because I feel like once you develop a template for one college's why essay, then that template can be like used for all the other ones, and like just changing like all the specifics to the school. But I think what really helped me with all of my essays was I would just spend like an hour reading samples on the internet before writing anything, and then that just really helped me develop my own templates.
Yeah, and once you have that structure down, it's pretty easily reworkable, adaptable for different supplements.
Yeah.
And so because you wrote so many supplements, that means you applied to a number of different schools. How did you go about deciding where to apply? What were your criteria?
Right. So when I started the university research process, I was completely lost. I was like, what should I focus on? And the thing is, like, the university, like, each university's website itself gives you like a great insight into their academic offerings, maybe even into like their social life and traditions. But one thing that I couldn't like find many sources for was just like getting a vibe of the school, and just like a vibe of the student body there. So I think Yale provides us with like these FIS guides for each university, and I think those were super useful in just like getting the vibe of each school, because again, like there aren't that many sources of information unless you know students at those schools that you can talk to. So that's what I pretty much use to go off.
Yeah, the FIS guide is truly invaluable. At a certain point, as you're researching dozens and dozens of schools, the numbers and the admissions rates and the test scores all begin to blend together. And it's really the FIS guide that allows you to distinguish one school from another in
for sure.
the din, so to speak. And you also made the decision to apply early action. Tell us about that and how you kind of came to that decision.
Right. So after I spent those 2 weeks at Yale's campus this summer, the past summer, I was just like when I left, I was like, I can totally see myself coming back here for like the next 4 years. And I was like, I completely loved that place. I hadn't visited many other schools, so that might be one reason I was just like completely infatuated with Yale itself. But so I decided to apply single choice early action to Yale. So that was the only school I applied to early because it was restrictive. And then I got deferred. So then when I started looking into other schools for my regular admissions process, that's when I came across Penn. And the reason like I'm really glad that like that's where I've chosen at the end is because I feel like, again, with like, since I have so many varied interests, it's like not only does Penn have a great computer science program, but they also have like incredible opportunities in economics and business that I could intertwine. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And on the subject of strategizing, all the supplements you had to write, you were also remarkably organized throughout the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it made your life much less stressful. Tell us about how did you organize your time throughout the application season? How did you keep yourself accountable? How did you reward yourself for meeting your deadlines on time?
Yeah, I think the obviously the most time-consuming part would have been the essays, and I think I developed this sort of game I would play with myself where I would like create these bingo grids and put in like 9 essays I had to write that week, and then every time I would finish like a row or a column, I would give myself some sort of reward or a break. So I think that was just like one way of just keeping myself motivated throughout. Like it never felt like a chore that I had to write these essays. It was just like a more fun sort of thing.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to finish by mid-December.
Yeah, it was surprising, but I was actually done with all of my essays with all of my applications by mid-December. Yeah.
Yeah, you were in the clear.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like entering into that waiting period? Those 3 months where everything went kind of quiet.
Yeah. I think when you submit your last application, that's when it really hits you that like this, like everything I've been doing for the last 3 months is like over now. And like now for a brief moment, it feels like there's nothing to do anymore. And that's when it really hits you like, I can't wait for 3 more months to get these decisions. But I think what made it easier was just like from the last week of December all the way to like mid-February, I was busy with interviews. So I think like that definitely took up a lot of time that I would have otherwise spent like worrying about decisions. Yeah.
Right. So you probably had about a month or so of crickets, silence,
Mm-hmm.
and then mid-January is when students start to hear about interviews. Interviews in the U.S. Go ahead.
And I was just gonna say actually because again I applied to Yale early, but I didn't have an interview before December. So actually that was my first interview that I got last week of December. So I started like much earlier than other people.
Fair enough. The benefits of starting early, you get to interview early, get it done with. For those who are wondering about how interviews look in the US, they're optional in many cases, and it's actually only a minority of schools that actually incorporate interviews into their decision process. But Ananya, as someone who did a number of interviews, what was your experience? How did you prepare? Were there any curveballs?
Right. So when I got my first interviewer request, I was definitely super intimidated because I didn't know like what was going to happen. But Peter gave me this great mock interview where he simulated all the like everything perfectly, and he asked a little more difficult than the other interviews would be, which I think is a really good thing because that way like you're completely prepared for the actual interviews. So then like going into the actual interviews, all I did was like I kept like this research notebook for my interviews, and then I would just like honestly they were all pretty chill conversations with alumni. Like they just really wanted to know more about you and whether you would fit into their school.
Right, and the alumni interviewer is not the final arbiter. They are mostly trying to get a sense of you in person, and if not in person, over Skype. But as you mentioned, it does tend to be more conversational than people usually think when they think of the interview. It's not an interrogation.
Yeah.
You're not being questioned under a single bare light bulb. It's pretty laid back, I think, as you experienced.
For sure.
And so once you were done with the interviews, that was basically the end of the application process. As you look back on those months, what was the hardest aspect?
I I would say the hardest aspect just like every time your morale starts to drop, like every time you get a deferral or a wait list or a rejection. But I think what really helped me with that was you and Peter every single time would send me this huge paragraph about like, don't worry about it, keep your head held high. We know like this will work out for you. And I think I remember 2 years ago, like before I joined Yale, a previous Yale student had said to me, these counselors will believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. And at that point, I didn't understand like the importance of that. But like after having gone through it, I definitely think that was one of the reasons Yale was most helpful for me.
Yeah, and you were also sort of remarkably adaptable throughout the process. You turned a deferral into an opportunity to research other schools, explore opportunities you hadn't considered yet. And I think that's a valuable lesson for anybody watching this, for anybody applying. A rejection is in no way, shape, or form a verdict on you as a person, you as a student. The application process incorporates so many different elements, and sometimes a deferral can be an opportunity in and of itself.
For sure.
And in the end, so let's fast forward from January to late March. You're receiving your offers, you're weighing your options. How did you make your decision?
Yeah, so for me, it came down to Penn, Duke, and Berkeley, and especially like Berkeley was the one that was like really hard to turn down, especially because like they have like one of the top computer science programs in the country. But again, like with the whole like with all my varied interests, the reason I thought Penn would have been the better fit for me was if I had chosen Berkeley, I would have had to stick to computer science. But with Penn, I can like experiment with different like minors in psychology or like dual degrees with business. So I just thought that would give me more opportunities.
So in the end, it was the flexibility that Penn offered.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there particular aspects that you think are unique to Penn that you're excited about?
Well, Penn is known as the social Ivy, and like they have like a lot of focus on like networking and all that, and I think that's a really great like aspect for me because like I love meeting people, and also like I feel like if I network like all the time, I feel like that could improve my own networking skills as well. And like, that's definitely like one aspect that's super important in the real world. Yeah.
Cool. And I think one of my final questions before we move to answering some of the audience's questions is, now that the application process is finished and you have an open summer waiting in front of you, what are you planning on doing?
Right. So again, like I have finals for 2 more weeks, but then after that, it's just like Penn already has like a ton of resources that need to be like poured through. Like we've already created our like 10 email IDs and stuff. And now it's like our advisors are going to be assigned to us, I think in like 5 days. So we're going to be like involved with like selecting courses and everything, creating mock schedules. So yeah, and then also just like spending time with my family because there's only like 3 months left.
Yeah. And what sort of opportunities have you found so far for connecting with other future Penn students?
So as soon as I like got into like as soon as I decided that I would be attending Penn, I have like friends who again from YYGS who I knew from the early decision round would be attending Penn. So I just like contacted them and they gave me like these GroupMe links. And now there's like a complete like GroupMe system, groups with like all kinds of everything you could possibly need, all the resources you could need. We talk to like 2023 students all the time. So it's just like the community is already, reaching out like really well.
Yeah, you'll find for everybody that is applying that students are very excited to get started, very excited to finish high school, as I'm sure you can relate to. And people are just eager to get to know their future classmates.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think, Peter, we can shift it over to questions from the audience. I know there are a number of them.
Yes, there are. Very, very insightful. Thank you for sharing your experience, Ananya. I would like to ask you a couple questions before we hand it over to the audience, if that's cool. It's interesting, you referred to Penn as the social Ivy, and I think so many of the students who are Zooming in now may not really appreciate the nuances, the differences in character, between or among the Ivy League schools, and just all the highly selective universities. So
Mhm.
tell us why, again, Penn seemed like a good fit from a social perspective, an academic perspective. What were some of the other factors that, influence your decision to commit and ultimately submit your deposit and enroll?
Yeah. So first, going back to what you said about like noticing the differences between all the IVs, definitely before like I started researching, to me as well, they all seemed like I couldn't really distinguish immediately, but that's why I refer to like the FISC guide, because that's truly like one resource that can allow you to like look into like the core of each school and like what really differentiates each one. And the reason why I think Penn, like from a social perspective or academically, is a great fit for me is because they have like this great set of, again, with like the core curriculum, which a lot of schools have. They don't have like extensive core requirements. They just have like basic ones that do allow you to explore different fields, but at the same time would allow me to like go into all the fields that I want to go into, like again, like business and computer science. And then from a social perspective, again, like I feel like with all the networking, that like really creates like real world skills that can be applied elsewhere.
Very good. Nathan, if Penn is the social ivy, what is Brown?
Brown is the tree-hugging ivy, without a shade of doubt. Brown is known for its open curriculum. There's no such thing as gen ed requirements. Students take the classes they want to take. You can take any class pass-fail, although it is not recommended to take too many classes pass-fail. It is definitely the hippie ivy of sorts. Yeah.
Did you fit that mold yourself?
That's for other people to say.
I mean, going by your favorite U Chicago essay, it seems like you fit into the tree hugging ivy.
Exactly. There's a reason I chose the tree mail essay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, Ananya, what I'd like to hear more about, like, so many students think they need to fit like a certain mold. They need to be in a small box. You're either the computer science major or you're the poet. You're both, right? And you're truly, one, very, very academically exceptional in all of your courses, right? And a high achiever also when it came. We have some questions about standardized testing later as well on the SAT. But did you also feel that you were more drawn to the US because you don't fit in just a small little box?
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely like the top reason, because again, like with the UK, I would have had to like constrain myself to like one field, which I didn't already know what I want to be going into. So again, with the US, and also because again, with like the Common App and with like the admissions process for the US, they really allow you to show every aspect of your personality. So even though like my academics would only show like the computer science and math side, with all my extracurriculars and like my personality and everything else, that shows all the other interests I have.
Incredible.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's great. And I think that, really sets you apart from many of the other students that we worked with. And it's going to take you very far in life, no matter what you study and where you go.
Thank you.
Because you have both the technical, but also the interpersonal skills, creative skills that will really propel you in whatever you do, especially when it comes to interpersonal communication. And also you demonstrate an incredible amount of emotional intelligence, I would say, which is another factor that, a lot of students don't know that you have to, it matters if you're a nice person, right? Like it matters like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just about the grades, because this comes out in the recommendations, do you work well with others? Are you willing to provide support to your peers? Are you a leader? Do you have the respect of faculty, right? Not just what kind of person are you, right, through others' eyes, not just, what are your academic results? Because if you're just like an individualistic, someone who puts their head down and just gets all the grades and just, has the blinders on and does not want to help anybody, that's not really the kind of, individual that they want to welcome to their community, right? Any organization, just not just the highly selective schools. Very good. One last question from me. Awesome feedback. Thank you. I know I'm a tough interviewer. Better to over-prepare, right? We have a question actually from an anonymous attendee that asked, how many of your interviews were in person? How many were online? Did you prepare differently for them? With most of the interviews probably going to be online, let's say, if this COVID situation continues, do you have any tips? There's probably 4 questions in that one question.
Yeah. With regards to how many were in person and how many were like over Skype, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was around 50-50. And there was like a slight difference in the way I prepared, because like with the ones that are online, you can like keep bouncing down at your research and it doesn't seem that awkward, but obviously like in person, it would seem extremely awkward. So the ones that I had to like do in person, I definitely researched the schools a little more. But then like I feel like there isn't like that much of a difference between like preparing for the two. Yeah, Nathan, do you have any other tips?
I think you covered it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, again, going into it, thinking of it as more of a conversation than an interrogation is also really important. Your mindset as you approach them, just to make sure that you're not nervous, you feel like you're comfortable to express yourself. Again, one of the purposes of the interview is for them to get a sense of you on an interpersonal level. Beyond the applications, how do you interface with a human being when put either face-to-face or screen-to-screen in live time? When you don't have time to go over your essays and review them, what are you like?
Absolutely. And I think, again, there's a big misconception out there that with the American university interviews, that they're there to assess, the interviewer is there to assess your knowledge of a particular subject, which is the case, let's say, in Oxford or Cambridge. But, you know, as an alumni interviewer, I remember I was explicitly told not to talk about grades and test scores, right? I was there, the first question I was asked was, rate the students' knowledge of and enthusiasm for Johns Hopkins, right? They have your grades, they have their test scores, they ultimately want to see, as Nathan said, and a person you are, and also if you're a good fit for the university, right? Brown has the tree hugging, you know, characters. You know, Penn is very social, right? Hopkins very academically rigorous and focused on research, right? So do you fit that mold? Because as we all know, different strokes for different folks, and there's a home for everybody, and they want to make sure that, you know, you'll be at home there as well. Excellent. Good. I'm just going to read off some of the anonymous questions here, and I will also ask some of the live questions for the attendees who listed their names. Next question for you, Ananya. How many universities did you apply to, and how many do you recommend people to apply to, recommend others to apply to?
I definitely went overboard. I applied to 25. I would not recommend, I would not recommend applying to that many, because there were definitely a lot of essays to write. But I do think like it's important to have like a nice balance between like reaches, matches, and safeties. And like the reason for me it was so many was because like I knew I wanted to like shoot my shot at a lot of incredible schools. And like again, because I'm so indecisive, I couldn't like narrow down like I like this school more than the other. But yeah.
Nathan, do you recommend that students apply to 25 universities?
For the sake of your sanity, for the sake of your parents' sanity, usually not. But again, Ananya, as you mentioned, your circumstances were unique in that you were applying to a group of incredibly selective schools, and you shot your shot.
Very good. Thank you for sharing your experience. Another question about the Yale summer program. Again, there are many universities that offer summer programs. Not all of them are created equally. Tell us what appealed to you about YYGS, what the process was like, and how difficult was it to get in?
I believe the acceptance rate is around 20%. It was just like a mini college application. It was a nice prep before going into the actual admissions process. So again, we had like letters of recommendation, we had essays to write, and then we had like obviously our grades and extracurriculars to show. And then like with regards to the actual process, again, like it was just extremely enriching to see like how life goes on and like universities on the other side of the globe. Again, like there were so many things packed into it. There was like this 2-week capstone project we did, which allowed us to get like priceless research experience. Yeah.
Very good. Nathan, do you have a favorite summer program that you like to recommend to students?
Favorite summer program? For students who, I'd say one incredible option for students who happen to be US citizens is the NSLIY scholarship, which provides full scholarships for language study around the world. You can study Chinese, you can study Russian. I spent a summer in Tajikistan after my junior year of high school, studying Persian. Again, I understand that would be a minority of students. I think, based on what I've seen this season, Columbia has a really incredible variety of courses being offered, Brown as well, YYGS. For students interested in anything STEM related, the Clark Scholarship through Texas Tech is a really incredible and very selective opportunity. Unfortunately, it's not happening this year for obvious reasons, but it's a full scholarship and it's stipended. So they are giving you money. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, something to keep in mind for next year.
Something to keep in mind.
Thank you so much. We have a question from VK. VK, on standardized testing. I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask the question directly. So, VK, you are live. And you are muted. And I'm going to unmute you. Are you there, VK? VK looks like he might not be there. Okay. If he's not, I'm just going to ask the question that he has asked. Which did you take, the SAT or the ACT, and how did you decide which one to take?
Yeah, I took the SAT, and before I took the actual test, I remember doing a practice test of the SAT and of the ACT, and I definitely thought, like, even though the initial diagnostic scores, I don't remember them exactly, but they were kind of equivalent in both exams. The reason I thought the SAT suited me better was because with the ACT, there's less time. So within the reading portion, I felt extremely constrained. And then again, with the SAT, I think they say that the questions are a little more complicated, and with the ACT it's simpler, but you have more time in the SAT. So I personally didn't find the questions that much more complicated. So just because of the time constraints, I preferred the SAT.
Excellent. How many times did you take the exam?
I just took it once, beginning of junior year.
This is incredible too, because this is something I keep telling students and they keep not listening to me. Is that the really well-prepared students, it's one and done, right? Mm. You put all of your effort, and this is for everybody who is a junior or even a sophomore here, if you're really precocious. You spend the entire summer studying very diligently, right? You have 12 weeks to put together a study plan. You take the SAT exam at the end of August. And that, score is reflective of your efforts and ability. There's no reason to take it again, right? But as I think both of you know, a lot of times students will take it 2 times. They'll take it 3 times. They'll take it a month apart. They won't really study any differently between exams. And they're surprised when the score doesn't change. It's not a casino where you show up and get lucky, right? Somehow my number's going to come up today. So Ananya, please, and it's so valuable when it comes from you, because the kids will listen to you. They won't listen to the old man who knows that. But tell us about your training regimen, your preparation regimen, and how it worked out for you to take it only once and secure an amazing score.
Yeah, I honestly just use Khan Academy. I think the resource on there is incredible, and the way they structure your practice as well is every time you take a practice test, they tell you what skills you need to improve on. So then you just keep practicing those skills and then do another practice test. I think one thing that a lot of people don't do that I strongly encourage is doing all 8 practice tests before your first sitting. So really exhaust all your options, everything that is available to you. And then that way you should be ready by your first practice test and by your first actual test.
I think what I've also seen too with the super high achievers like yourself, if you want to share your score with the SAT, please do, but if not, that's okay. But for the super high achievers, they can self-study, right? If they have discipline, they go through, the materials, they keep to a very, strict schedule, but not everybody is, that disciplined.
Yeah.
Nathan, is this something that you've seen as well, that some students maybe try to self-study, but then become frustrated because they don't make the progress that they want?
Self-study is so difficult. It's difficult for me. I have attempted to self-study many languages, for example. And, you know, for the first week or two, you have this energy and you think like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick to this routine. I have a schedule, and it's easy to fall off that wagon. It is very easy. It can be difficult. I think the discipline is the most difficult aspect of it, making a habit out of test prep, not just doing it every once in a while when you feel like you need to, but actually being consistent, blocking off time every night. Even if you start with, you know, 20, 30 minutes every night, and then you build up over time to 40 minutes, 50 minutes. That being said, it's difficult to keep the motivation for the amount of time you need to be prepping.
And last question on this topic, I agree with you 100%, Nathan. So Ananya, what was your regimen? What was your schedule? You know, how did you do it? How many weeks, how many hours per week? You said you did 8 practice tests. So please, you know, for everybody who's out there self-studying, if you want to do it, you got to do it like this. So please tell us how.
Actually, it sounds much more complicated than the way I did it. Like, I didn't actually like pencil in like these many hours every day, but I would just like, every time I had like a bit of free time, I would just sit down and like start practicing. And then again, just like using Khan Academy's like already built in like methods. And I think I started like around May, and then so May to September. My test was in October.
Okay. Do you want to share your SAT score? Someone, an anonymous attendee, has asked.
Yeah, it was 1580.
Yeah, not bad.
Thanks.
Did you get one question wrong, or two?
No, it was 3 questions in the reading section.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean, you are a genius, and again, exceptional. I don't know if most students, I know I couldn't in my free time just prepare for the SAT and knock that at 1580. No chance. Not even today. Wonderful. Next question says, wow, this is a very long question. Feels like you started out with a certain target list of schools in mind, but in the end, you quickly showed resilience in terms of adjusting and adapting your school choices. For instance, looking into Penn, can you talk about the choices you made after you found out that you didn't get into your early action school, Yale? How did you adapt, change, maybe look at other universities through a different lens?
Yeah. Right. So before like the decision came out, like when we were still in like the early action period, I was mostly like I was building my college list like in case a deferral or like a rejection happened. But at the same time, I was like extremely focused on Yale. I was like, I'm pretty sure like this is where I want to go at the moment. But then after like I found out I was deferred, that's when like I really opened my eyes to the other schools, and I really like started falling in love with a lot more of them. And I think that's what like helped me like prevail in the end. Like I think a lot of people say that like sometimes the first school you set your sights on is not ultimately like the perfect school for you. So you definitely need to keep your eyes open like the entire time.
Incredible. Very good. Excellent. Nathan, did you know, as the counselor and the guide here on this journey, did you see a shift in terms of focus or receptiveness to maybe other universities that weren't, you know, quite as, you know, interesting before the decision?
Yeah, I mean, I was just really impressed by how resilient you were throughout the process. And I'm impressed by many students who really take disappointment in stride. And I think as you approach the process, it's difficult, right? Because on one sort of rational level, you can begin to imagine deferrals or rejection as an opportunity, but obviously on an emotional level, they might not feel that way. It can feel pretty devastating sometimes when you really have your hopes set high. Students should feel like they can take the time they need to process the decision, process it emotionally, but know that, again, it is not a verdict. There's so many options, Peter, as you said, there's a home for everybody. And consider it an opportunity to change course, not give up course.
Very good. I'd like, if we can dig a little bit deeper there, Ananya. Okay, take us through, you received the notification from Yale. Okay.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
When you received your decision from Yale.
Okay.
Take us through how you processed the information on your screen, the feelings that you experienced, and how long did it take, before you just kind of refocused your efforts on the other applications that you had ahead of you?
Yeah, so I think the Yale like early decision came out at like 2 a.m. or something. So my parents were asleep and I was just like up in my bed, cuddled up, waiting for the screen to like light up with like view status. And I think like obviously I was keeping in mind that like no one can really expect to get in, and like even though I had like this amazing experience on their campus already, I knew that like I was hoping to get in, because then I was like, okay, this will all be over already, like I won't have to go through like 3 more months of waiting. But like again, like I didn't really expect to get in, so when I got deferred, it wasn't like much of a blow. Like it was a bit of a blow, but then like it was just like, okay, I just have to keep going like 3 more months and then I'll actually know where I want to go. Yeah.
Incredible. No, and I think we can all learn from your ability to overcome obstacles, because that is extremely disappointing for many students. But I think my personal philosophy is, in life, we can not control many things that happen to us, but we can control how we respond and how we move forward from that point. And you definitely embody that philosophy and embrace it. So again, not worried about you at all. Whatever endeavors you may pursue in the future. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have another question here about financial aid and scholarships. Did you receive either? And if so, could you share a little bit about the scholarships and financial aid you received?
Yeah, so the merit scholarships I received were mostly from my safeties, so I did receive a few of those. But with regards to financial aid, when like we found out that it's need-based financial aid, and that like most US schools are not need-blind to international students, should I explain that a little bit? Like need-blind is when like the school does not take into account how much money you're asking for before they decide whether they want you as a student. Like if they choose to accept you, they will cover whatever need you demonstrate. But since most schools are not need blind to international students, like I knew that could be a weak link in my application. And also considering that like it was need blind, we didn't think that, like I remember my dad had like this huge conversation with you, and we discussed how even since it was need blind, we wouldn't really end up getting much like money anyway. So at the end, I decided not to apply for any need-based financial aid packages. So it was just like those merit scholarships that I received at like a couple of schools.
Okay, but I think they were quite considerable, right? So could you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So at Tulane University, it was $37,000 a year for 4 years. And then I think Case Western Reserve, it was $15,000 a year for 4 years. And Northeastern was $10,000 a year for 4 years.
Okay, very good, excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those experiences. Now you go to a very unique school that has a unique curriculum, which in some ways I think poses obstacles to some students, right? Because it's not pure IB, it's not A levels, it's a little bit of it's like a Greek salad here. We have a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So for you, tell us a little bit about the AP courses that you took, and when did you take them, and your performance in those exams. And I think you took a couple just now, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah. So maybe you can take us through also how the online APs differed from the paper-based tests, you know, for other students that may not have those reference points, that maybe took APs for the first time only in the online format this year.
Yeah, so honestly, personally, I didn't think that like this medley of options Sabas is our curriculum at ChoicePad. This medley of options that Sabas offers was like, I didn't see it as a hindrance. I thought more of like an opportunity where you can really just choose whatever field you want to go into instead of being constrained by like a rigid curriculum. So again, since I always knew I wanted to go to the US, I chose to focus on AP. And then, so I took my first AP in 9th grade, and then it just continued like over the years. And the difference between like online APs and in-person APs are definitely much longer, and they have multiple choice sections and free response sections. This year with the online APs, I honestly really enjoyed them because with pre-response, I find that even though some people might find them harder to answer, they're actually a lot more straightforward. Like multiple choice questions are the ones where they throw the tricks in. So with this year, with it only being like a 45-minute exam, and with it, like you can do it from like the comfort of your own home, and it's just like 2 pre-response questions, I found it much more comfortable this year. Yeah.
Excellent answer. Thank you. Nathan, do you think that students interested in U.S. universities who take AP exams are at an advantage to their peers who maybe do not take AP exams?
What matters most when an admissions officer is looking at an application is rigor. Whether that rigor comes through the form of APs, of a particularly rigorous load in the IB curriculum, A-levels taking 4 instead of 3. A student will never be disadvantaged for opportunities or circumstances beyond their control. Admissions officers are looking contextually, they're looking at what's offered in a given school, they're looking at how many APs you take relative to your classmates. And so there isn't quite an advantage in APs per se. Ananya, what was sort of advantageous about what you did was just the sheer rigor of it, taking an APs starting from the 9th grade. That in and of itself is a rarity. But admissions officers are looking to see that you've made the most of whatever opportunities you have available to you.
Excellent. Ananya, how many APs did you take?
In total, I believe it was 11 or 12.
You just lost track after you got to the different levels.
Yeah.
They all began to blend together.
Yeah.
Have you received already AP National Scholar, or which AP awards have you already?
Oh my gosh, I forgot what it's called. I think it's the International Scholar. It's the one you get after getting 5 scores above 4, I believe.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Excellent. And how many did you take this year?
This year it was 6. Yeah.
6. So quite a few in your final year. Incredible. Amazing.
Yeah. I was actually supposed to take 8. I was actually supposed to take 8, but once I decided that I would be going to Penn doesn't offer credit for some of like the APs for the AP English exam, so then I just canceled those. Yeah,
prudent, very wise decision. No need to go through it afterwards. Wonderful. Well, we're coming to a close now. We're coming to the close of the hour, and I just want to thank everybody for Zooming in. If anyone is attending, would like to learn more about how we can help students like we helped Ananya, please do visit our website, haleeducation.com. We offer a free initial consultation, and it'll be very beneficial for us to understand your needs and also describe how we can help. Ananya, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences. I would like to ask you, final thought. There are a few names I recognize here in the attendee list, and a few of them are younger, and I'm sure they would like to be in your position a year from now, sitting very comfortably and looking forward to enrolling into one of their dream schools. But what advice do you have for them, for the juniors and the sophomores? What can you tell them through your own experiences? What did you learn, and what can you pass on to them?
Yeah, I would just say one thing is that when a lot of people have like a lot of free time and they don't know what to do with it. So I would just say find like whatever it is you love doing and just go further into that, like whatever it is, even if you don't see like immediate benefits, like I did with poetry, creating a poetry blog was really just for my own personal growth. But if you do things like that, it really, even if you don't see like the benefits immediately, like they will come across like when the actual application season comes around. Yeah.
Very good. And Nathan, I think you deal with a very high number of talented students in Abu Dhabi, but I think Ananya is truly special, and maybe you can share your own insight as to what really made her shine and stand out from the crowd from your perspective.
So my perception was that when it came time for Ananya to get even started on these essays, it felt like things came so naturally. When essays presented themselves about a passion, about an involvement, obviously they didn't write themselves. You wrote those essays and you put in the work, but there was so obviously a passion, sort of a life force driving each of your essays that I think really, really stood out. Your passion for poetry that animated your personal statement, your interest in computer science that was present throughout your supplements, there was such a clear energy you had
Mhm.
throughout the different components of your application.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the energy is clear in person, and to express it effectively through writing is also fantastic. So you did a fantastic job in both. Definitely want to wish you all the best at Penn in the
Thank
fall. Please keep in touch. We want to continue to track your progress. And if you
Yeah.
do have any poetry that you publish or just publish on your blog, we'd love to continue to read.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananya, again. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Next week, we'll have another session, another webinar, same time, 5 p.m., same place. Hope to see you then. Till then, have a great evening. Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.